Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down history's most compelling figures and events. So, how does a teenage peasant girl with no military training completely change the course of a war that had been raging for nearly 100 years? It sounds like fiction, right? Well, let's get right into it. This is an absolutely incredible story about faith, pure conviction, and how one person can literally change the fate of a nation. All right, so our story kicks off in a kingdom that's basically falling apart at the seams. And it's here that a young girl's visions are about to light a fire that will change everything. Okay, so to really get Joan, you gotta get the world she was born into. We're talking the early 1400s, and France is an absolute mess. It's been torn apart by the Hundred Years' War with England, and there's a nasty civil war going on. You've basically got three different Frances. You have the English holding the north, including Paris. Then you've got their allies, the Burgundians, holding a huge chunk of territory. And finally, there's what's left for the French heir, the Dauphin, Charles VII. He's really in a tough spot. So, right into the middle of all this chaos, around 1412, a girl named Jeanne is born in this little village called Domrémy. Now, her parents were peasants, yeah, but they were pretty well off and respected in town. And Jeanne, well, from a very young age, she was known for being incredibly devout. People called her La Pucelle, which just means the maid. And then, when she's just 13 years old, everything changes. She's out in her father's garden, and she hears a voice. She's convinced it's a message from God. And, at first it completely terrified her. But that voice, it was about to give her a mission that would not only define her life, but completely rewrite the future of France. It wasn't just one voice either. Over time, she said they were the voices of Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret. And their instructions, well, they were huge. Basically, they told her three things: be a good, pious person, kick the English out of France, and finally, leave the Dauphin Charles to Reims Cathedral to be crowned king, which was, the only place a true French king could be crowned. Okay, so having a divine mission from saints is one thing, but walking into a royal court full of skeptical, powerful men and convincing them you're the key to saving France, that's a whole other level of challenge. I mean, just think about the guts this took. First, she goes to the local captain, who pretty much just laughs in her face. But she keeps at it and finally convinces him. So what does she do? She cuts her hair, puts on men's clothes, and rides for 11 days straight through enemy territory to get to the Dauphin. And when she finally gets there, it's not like they roll out the red carpet. Nope. She has to face a panel of a bunch of theologians who grill her for weeks, trying to make sure she's not, getting her messages from the devil. But once they give her the green light, wow, her impact is immediate and just staggering. The city of Orléans, which was super important, had been under siege by the English for months. It looked like it was totally going to fall. Joan shows up, inspires these demoralized French soldiers, and the siege is broken. In just 9 days. 9! And look, Orléans wasn't just some lucky break. It was the spark that lit the whole fire. The momentum from that victory was just incredible. It was like a whirlwind. Her army, totally fired up now, just sweeps through the Loire Valley. They absolutely crushed the English at the Battle of Patay. And just like that, this string of unbelievable wins clears a path straight through enemy territory, all the way to Reims. So, with the military path now wide open, Joan could focus on the most important part of her mission, the part that was all about symbolism and legitimacy. And this was the moment. July 17th, 1429. There she is, standing right beside Charles VII as he's crowned King of France in Reims Cathedral. She'd done it. She fulfilled the prophecy. And you gotta understand, this was way more than just a ceremony. It was a massive political and psychological victory. It basically told the world that God was on France's side, and it gave King Charles the legitimacy he had been so desperately lacking. But, her meteoric rise couldn't last forever. An attack on Paris fails, she gets wounded, and some of the support from the royal court starts to dry up. And then the worst happens. In May of 1430, during a siege, she's pulled right off her horse and captured by Burgundian soldiers. And what do? They sell her, like a prize, to their English allies. So now she's a prisoner, held in Rouen, which was basically the English headquarters in France. And here, Joan would face her final battle. But this one wasn't going to be fought with swords and banners. It was going to be fought in a courtroom. And let's be crystal clear, this was a sham trial from the very beginning.
It was all politics. The English had to prove that Joan was a heretic, that her voices were demonic. Why? Because if she was a witch, then the king she crowned was illegitimate. It was their only way to undo everything she'd accomplished. The whole thing was run by a pro-English bishop. But this is where you see her incredible spirit. Here's this teenage peasant girl who can't read or write, being cross-examined by a room full of brilliant, hostile theologians who are trying to trap her with trick questions. And her answers, they were just legendary. So sharp, so clever. Like when they asked her if God hated the English, she gave this amazing response you see here. She completely sidestepped their trap. Just incredible. They threw something like 70 charges at her, but it all really boiled down to a few things. First, heresy. By claiming to talk directly to God, she was bypassing the authority of the church. Big no-no. Second, wearing men's clothing, which was against religious law. And finally, the big one, witchcraft. They argued her power had to be demonic because how else could you explain it? So after months of this grilling, they finally trap her. They trick her into putting on men's clothes again, which technically made her a relapsed heretic. And that was all they needed. They declared her guilty and handed her over to be executed. On May 30th, 1431, in the market square of Rouen, she was burned at the stake. She was only about 19 years old. Her enemies thought that was the end. They burned her body and even threw her ashes into the river Seine, so there would be no grave, no relics for people to worship. They wanted to literally erase her from history. But her story was nowhere near over. Fast forward about 25 years. The war is over, and the French have won, thanks in no small part to the fire she lit. A new trial is ordered by the Pope himself. Her conviction? Completely nullified. She's officially declared a martyr. And even that wasn't the end. Centuries later, the very same institution that killed her, the Church, starts the long process to make her a saint. I mean, look at this. It's one of the most incredible turnarounds in history. In 1431, the Church condemns her as a heretic. By 1920, they've canonized her as a saint. It just goes to show you that a person's story doesn't end when they die. Legacies evolve, and history, well, history gets rewritten. So, what can we take away from Joan's story today? I think it's about the sheer power of conviction, of believing in something so fiercely that you can inspire others to change the world. She shows us how one person can become this incredibly powerful national symbol. And her journey from being branded a heretic to becoming a saint, it's a perfect lesson in how historical stories aren't set in stone. They change and evolve right along with us. So, in the end, what was she? A saint? A soldier? A symbol? The truth is, she was all of them. Her legacy is so complex, which is why we're still talking about her 600 years later. It's this incredible story of faith, of courage, and of what it means to fight for what you believe in. And it proves, without a doubt, that the voice of one determined young person can echo through centuries.